Welcome to Mr. Crimeshow. Tonight's episode brings you another chilling true crime case, told with the sound of rain in the background and a black screen to set the perfect atmosphere. This story is filled with twists and unsettling details, crafted to keep you listening while also helping you relax, unwind, and fall asleep. If you like our work, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share in the comments where you're listening from. The Miyazawa family tragedy, a night that changed everything. For the residents of the quiet Kamisoshigaya district, the year 2000 marked the start of changes no one saw coming. From urban expansion to the unstoppable growth of Tokyo, the families living on what was once a bustling street watched as many neighbors sold their property and moved away. By December, the Miyazawa family was one of only 4 homes remaining in the area. But on the night of December 30th, 2000, at the turn of the new millennium, they would face something far more devastating than urban change. A crime so horrific would forever alter the landscape of their neighborhood and shock an entire nation. Mikio Miyazawa, 44 years old, worked as a dedicated businessman who neighbors described as congenial and well-liked by everyone. His wife Yasuko, 41, was a caring mother who ran a tutoring business from her home, teaching local children with the same patience and dedication she showed her own family. Their daughter Nina, just 8 years old, was a bright, energetic child who filled their home with laughter. Their youngest son Ray, 6, was a gentle boy who lived with a developmental disorder, which made his mother even more protective and nurturing toward him. The family's home stood as part of a unique duplex structure that looked like one large house, but was actually 2 attached homes. The Miyazawas occupied one side, while Yasuko's mother Haruko and other relatives lived in the adjoining unit. This close-knit arrangement meant the extended family was always nearby, sharing meals, celebrations, and the everyday joys of raising children together. Yasuko had built her tutoring business around this home, creating a warm environment where neighborhood children came to learn and grow. Realizing they needed more space for their growing family, the Miyazawas had already made the difficult decision to sell their property to the city, which planned to expand the nearby Soshigaya Park. The family had even begun making arrangements for their move. However, Yasuko chose to delay their departure because she worried about how the transition would affect her children, especially Ray, who needed stability in his learning environment. As an educator herself, she understood how important consistency was for a child's development, particularly for a child with special needs. December 30th began like any other day in the Miyazawa household. Like many families preparing for New Year celebrations, they spent the morning shopping near Chito's Karasugama station, gathering supplies and treats for the holiday. After completing their errands, the family returned home to spend a peaceful evening together. They shared dinner, watched television, and enjoyed the quiet comfort of being together as a family. As the evening wound down, each family member prepared for bed, unaware that these would be their final moments of normalcy. What happened in the hours that followed has puzzled investigators for more than 2 decades. Sometime after 11 p.m. on December 30th, an unknown individual approached the Miyazawa home through the adjacent Soshigaya Park. Using the fence in the backyard, this person managed to climb to the second-floor bathroom window, possibly aided by broken tree branches that were later discovered in the yard. After reaching the open window, the intruder removed the screen and entered the house, beginning a night of unimaginable horror. The first victim was little Ray, who was sleeping peacefully in his bedroom closest to the bathroom entry point. The intruder ended the 6-year-old boy's life while he slept, leaving investigators heartbroken at how suddenly his young life was taken. Ray was the only family member who passed away this way. The sequence of events that followed remains somewhat unclear, but evidence suggests that Mikio, who was still awake on the first floor finishing work, detected some disturbance upstairs. Whether he heard sounds from Ray's room or encountered the intruder for other reasons, Mikio rushed toward the stairs to investigate. It was there that he came face to face with his family's attacker. The confrontation between Mikio and the intruder was violent and desperate. The killer used a sashimi knife, a blade typically used for cutting seafood, to repeatedly strike Mikio as the father fought to protect his family. During this struggle, part of the knife blade actually broke off and remained lodged in Mikio's head, showing how forceful the attack had been. Despite his efforts to defend his home, Mikio eventually lost his life at the base of the stairs, where investigators would later find one of his slippers on the staircase above him. The intruder's final victims were Yasuko and Nina, who had been sleeping in the small attic area of their home. After disposing of the broken sashimi knife, the attacker took a kitchen knife from the family's own collection to complete these final acts of violence. Evidence from bloodstains on their bedding indicates that both mother and daughter were initially attacked while they slept. At some point during the assault, they attempted to flee from the attic down the foldable ladder that connected to the main house, but they were unable to escape. Their bodies were discovered at the top of the stairs on the second floor, positioned close together in what investigators believe was Yasuko's final attempt to shield her daughter. The injuries to both victims were severe, but forensic evidence revealed that 8-year-old Nina had endured particularly harsh treatment. She had not only been stabbed, but had also been beaten so severely that she lost teeth and suffered internal injuries. Most heartbreaking of all, the evidence showed that Nina was the last family member to lose her life that night, meaning she may have witnessed the earlier attacks on her family. But what transformed this already horrific crime into something that would captivate and horrify Japan for decades was what the killer did after completing these acts of violence. Rather than fleeing immediately, the intruder remained in the house for at least 2 hours, treating the family's home as if it were his own. This behavior, later dubbed by media as the Goldilocks murders, revealed a level of callousness that shocked even experienced investigators. The killer calmly walked past the bodies of the family members he had just attacked and made his way to the kitchen. There, he removed several containers of ice cream from the refrigerator, along with barley tea and possibly some melon. Rather than using utensils, he squeezed the ice cream containers to push the contents to the top and consumed them directly, leaving behind saliva and fingerprint evidence throughout the kitchen. During this time, the intruder also tended to an injury he had sustained during the attacks. Using the family's first aid kit, he bandaged a cut on his hand, carelessly leaving behind bloodied bandages that would later provide investigators with DNA evidence. After treating his wound, he explored other areas of the house, eventually making his way to a storage room where he rummaged through the family's personal documents. In a particularly disturbing display of disregard, the killer gathered some of these documents and carried them to the second-floor bathroom, where he dumped them into the bathtub. At some point, he also used this bathroom's toilet to relieve himself, leaving behind biological evidence, but neglecting to flush afterward. He wiped his bloodied hands on the bathroom towel, adding yet another source of DNA evidence to the growing collection he was unknowingly providing to future investigators. The intruder's activities also extended to the family's computer. At 1:18 a.m., he accessed Mikio's computer and created a new folder, possibly browsing websites that the family had bookmarked, including the father's workplace website. Some reports suggest he may have visited a local theater company's website as well, though this detail remains unconfirmed. Throughout his time in the house, the killer systematically removed articles of his clothing, ultimately leaving behind a jacket, hat, shirt, scarf, 2 handkerchiefs, a fanny pack, and black gloves. Both murder weapons were also abandoned at the scene. This extensive collection of personal items would later provide investigators with an unprecedented amount of physical evidence, leading some to believe the case would be quickly solved. The following morning brought the devastating discovery that would shatter the extended family forever. Haruko, Yasuko's mother, had been trying to reach her daughter by phone and through the home's intercom system without success. Growing concerned, she decided to check on the family personally. Using her own key to enter the house, Haruko made her way inside and immediately encountered the nightmare scene. She found Mikio's body first, lying at the bottom of the stairs where the attacker had left him. The shock of this discovery was overwhelming, but as she continued through the house, she realized the scope of the tragedy was even greater. After discovering all 4 family members, Haruko ran back to her own side of the duplex, where her son-in-law immediately called emergency services at 10:55 a.m. When Tokyo Metropolitan Police arrived at the scene at 11:06 a.m., they encountered what would become the most evidence-rich crime scene in Japanese history. The killer had left behind fingerprints, DNA from blood and saliva, clothing, footprints, hair samples, and even waste left in the toilet. This abundance of physical evidence initially gave investigators tremendous confidence that they would quickly identify and apprehend the perpetrator. Police Chief Takeshi Tsuchida, who was designated to lead the investigation, later described the scene's brutal nature. "When I think about the brutality, I just wonder how could a sane person carry out such an extreme crime," he said. "He slashed them from above the chest to the face, as if he tormented them. It was extremely brutal. It was so horrific, we couldn't show those images to the devastated victims' families. There are no other cases in which the victims have been cut up like this." The investigation that followed became the largest in Japanese history, eventually involving over 246,000 investigators and collecting more than 12,500 pieces of evidence. Forensic analysis of the killer's biological evidence revealed that he had type of blood and had consumed string beans and sesame seeds as his last meal before the attacks. His clothing provided a detailed picture of his appearance, showing he had worn a grey bucket hat, a distinctive baseball shirt with white body and purple sleeves, a plaid scarf, a jacket from the popular retailer UNIQLO, and Schlesinger sneakers in size 27. 5 cm. The shoes proved particularly significant because this size was never sold in Japan, but was available in South Korea. This led investigators to collaborate with Korean authorities, hoping to find a match in their fingerprint databases. However, despite the international cooperation, no matches were found, leading to another investigative dead end. Even more intriguing was the discovery of sand inside the killer's hip bag. When analyzed, this sand was determined to have originated from the Nevada desert, specifically from the area around Edwards Air Force Base in California. This finding led to widespread speculation about a possible military connection, with theories suggesting the killer might have been stationed at the base before being transferred to Japan, possibly to the nearby Yokota Air Base. DNA analysis revealed additional surprising details about the perpetrator. The results indicated mixed ancestry, with maternal DNA suggesting a mother of European descent, possibly from a southern European country near the Mediterranean or Adriatic Sea. The paternal DNA showed East Asian markers that appeared in 1 in 4 Koreans, 1 in 10 Chinese, and 1 in 13 Japanese people. This genetic profile supported theories about the killer being of mixed heritage, possibly the child of an international relationship. Despite the wealth of physical evidence, investigators struggled to establish a clear motive for the attacks. The Miyazawa family was universally described as kind, hardworking, and well-liked in their community. They had no known enemies or ongoing disputes that might have led to such violence. The only potential conflict mentioned was a minor incident a few days before the attacks when Mikio had complained to local skaters about noise from the nearby skate park. But this seemed insufficient to explain such brutal revenge. The investigation explored various theories, including burglary gone wrong, serial killer activity, and even speculation about organized crime connections. The burglary theory seemed unlikely given that the killer's first action was to attack sleeping 6-year-old Ray rather than search for valuables. While some money was taken from the house, a larger amount was left behind, suggesting theft was not the primary motive. One particularly chilling piece of evidence emerged from online forums. Just days before the attacks, an anonymous user calling himself Mr. Korematsu, and claiming to be 13 years old, had posted on the Japanese message board 2chan about wanting to commit a crime similar to the Oita family murder case. The post, made on December 27th, stated, "Now, when I see the happy family next door, I want to do something like that Oita family murder case. The closing date is December 31st at 11:59 p.m. I'm thinking about taking care of it before the 21st century arrives." While this connection was investigated, no definitive link to the Miyazawa attacks was ever established. Eyewitness accounts added another layer of complexity to the case. A taxi driver reported picking up 3 men in the area shortly after the estimated time of the attacks, with one passenger apparently injured and leaving bloodstains on the seat. Additionally, medical staff at a facility near Tobuniko Station reported treating a man in his 30s for a severe hand injury the day after the attacks, an injury so deep that bone was visible. When questioned about how he sustained the wound, the man refused to provide any explanation. The impact of these unsolved cases on the surviving family members has been profound and lasting. Setsuko Miyazawa, now 92 years old and grandmother to Nina and Rei, continues to seek justice for her lost family members. She can often be found at Chitose Karasayama Station, distributing flyers and hoping that someone, somewhere, might have information that could lead to the killer's identification and arrest. The investigation has continued for more than 2 decades, with Tokyo police maintaining a 24-hour guard at the former family home and keeping the case active. In 2010, partly because of public advocacy sparked by this case, Japan abolished the statute of limitations for crimes that could result in the death penalty, meaning the killer can still be prosecuted regardless of how much time has passed. The case has also sparked significant changes in Japanese law enforcement practices. Police have offered a reward of 20 million yen, approximately $190,000, for information leading to the killer's arrest, the largest reward ever offered by Japanese authorities. The investigation has incorporated international cooperation, DNA analysis techniques, and extensive community outreach in efforts to solve the case. Various theories about the killer's identity continue to circulate, from speculation about military connections to organized crime involvement to the possibility of a foreign perpetrator. Some investigators believe the killer may have been someone with military training, given the physical demands of scaling the house and the brutal efficiency of the attacks. Others point to the mixed genetic heritage as evidence of international connections that make traditional Japanese investigative methods less effective. The psychological profile of the killer that emerges from his post-crime behavior suggests someone with either severe mental health issues or a complete lack of empathy. The decision to remain in the house for hours after committing such violent acts, consuming the family's food, and using their facilities while their bodies lay nearby, indicates a level of detachment that forensic psychologists find particularly disturbing. Despite the passage of time, the Miyazawa case remains active and continues to receive significant attention from both law enforcement and the public. Annual memorial ceremonies are held at the site, and investigators continue to follow up on tips and leads that come in regularly. The case has inspired documentaries, podcasts, books, and extensive media coverage, keeping the family's story and the search for justice alive in public consciousness. The technological advances in DNA analysis and international criminal databases that have occurred since 2000 offer some hope that new developments might eventually emerge. Police continue to test evidence against updated databases and have expanded their international cooperation efforts, recognizing that the killer may not be of Japanese origin or may have fled the country after the attacks. For the community of Kamisoshigeya and the broader Tokyo area, the Miyazawa case serves as a stark reminder of how random violence can shatter the most innocent of lives. The fact that such a brutal crime could be committed against a family with no apparent connection to criminal activity has left many residents feeling vulnerable and has changed how people think about home security and community safety. The loss of Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei Miyazawa represents more than just four individual tragedies. Their story embodies the destruction of dreams, the interruption of a family's plans and hopes, and the devastating ripple effects that violent crime creates throughout extended families and communities. As investigators continue their work and family members continue to seek answers, the memory of this loving family serves as both a source of enduring pain and a motivation to never stop seeking justice for those whose voices were silenced on that terrible December night. The mystery that haunts Midlothian. It was supposed to be just another Monday morning fitness class at Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas. But on April 18, 2016, what began as a routine workout session would become one of the most haunting unsolved cases in Texas history. The story of Terry Leanne, Missy Bevers, would capture national attention, leaving behind a grieving family and a community forever changed by a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Missy Bevers was born on August 9, 1970, in Graham, Texas, the middle child in her family. She was born Terry Leanne Strickland, but had been called Missy for most of her life, a nickname that suited her warm and vibrant personality. Growing up in Texas, Missy developed a love for helping others that would define her throughout her life. She met Brandon Bevers, and after a courtship filled with shared dreams and hopes, they married on June 20, 1998. Their wedding marked the beginning of what appeared to be a loving partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. The early years of their marriage were filled with promise. Missy went back to school and started working as a teaching assistant, eventually landing a job in special education. It was the perfect role for someone with her caring nature and patience. She had a natural gift for working with children who needed extra support, and her colleagues often remarked on her ability to connect with students who struggled in traditional classroom settings. Her dedication to helping others was evident in everything she did. When Missy and Brandon welcomed their first child together, Missy made the difficult decision to step away from her teaching career to focus on raising their daughters. The couple would eventually have 3 daughters, Sarah, Hannah, and Alice, and the family made their home in Red Oak, Texas. Missy embraced motherhood with the same passion she brought to everything else in her life. She was devoted to her children, always putting their needs first while maintaining her own sense of purpose and identity. As her daughters grew older and became more independent, Missy felt ready to pursue a new chapter in her career. She had always been active and health conscious, so it felt natural when she decided to enter the fitness industry. She became a popular group fitness instructor, specializing in Camp Gladiator bootcamp classes that combined high-energy workouts with motivational coaching. Her classes were known for being challenging but supportive, and she had built a loyal following of clients who appreciated her encouraging approach to fitness. By 2016, Missy had established herself as a respected fitness instructor in the Dallas area. She regularly held her Camp Gladiator bootcamp sessions at Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, where the church had generously allowed her to use their facilities. The arrangement worked well for everyone involved, giving Missy a stable location for her classes while providing the church with a community service that brought people together around health and wellness. However, beneath the surface of what appeared to be a successful life, there were signs that all was not well. Police would later discover that Missy and Brandon were experiencing significant marital and financial difficulties at the time of her passing. Several reports suggested that Missy may have been involved in relationships outside her marriage to Brandon, though the full extent of these relationships remained a subject of investigation rather than confirmed fact. The strain on their marriage was something the couple had been working through, but it added complexity to what would become a tragic investigation. The weekend before her life was lost, Missy maintained her usual routine. On the evening of April 17, 2016, she was at home with her family, preparing for another week of fitness classes. That evening, she made several Facebook posts about her 5 a.m. Camp Gladiator bootcamp class scheduled for the following morning. These social media posts, filled with encouragement and motivation for her clients would tragically become her last communication with the world. She had no way of knowing that someone was already planning to ensure she would never teach another class. The weather forecast for Monday morning, April 18, 2016, showed heavy thunderstorms approaching the Midlothian area. Following her usual practice when outdoor conditions were unsafe, Missy informed her students that the fitness class would be moved inside the church rather than held in the parking lot as usual. This seemingly routine decision would prove to be a crucial detail in understanding the events that followed. Her clients appreciated her commitment to maintaining their workout schedule regardless of weather conditions. In the early hours of that Monday morning, while most of Midlothian was still asleep, surveillance cameras at Creekside Church of Christ captured footage that would become central to one of Texas's most perplexing unsolved cases. At 3:50 a.m., the cameras recorded an unknown individual breaking into the church building. The person was dressed from head to toe in what appeared to be SWAT riot gear, complete with a tactical vest marked police, a black helmet, and black gloves. The sight was both bizarre and terrifying. The surveillance footage showed this mysterious figure moving slowly through the empty, darkened hallways of the church. The person appeared to be carrying a hammer or similar tool in their left hand, and their movements were methodical, yet seemingly purposeless. They walked through the corridors, occasionally breaking glass windows and attempting to open various doors, but didn't appear to be searching for anything specific or valuable. The behavior suggested someone who was either buying time or creating the appearance of a burglary while waiting for something else to happen. What made the footage particularly unsettling was the suspect's distinctive walking pattern. The person moved with a unique gait, sometimes steadying themselves against the wall and appearing to have difficulty with their right foot or leg. Investigators would later bring in forensic specialists to analyze this gait, hoping it might provide clues to the person's identity or physical condition. The FBI even consulted with Dr. Michael Nienberg, a forensic podiatrist, who determined that while the gait was distinctive, it could not definitively determine the suspect's gender and might have been affected by the weight of the tactical gear they were wearing. At 4:18 a.m., Missy Bevers arrived at Creekside Church of Christ, completely unaware that someone was already inside waiting for her. She entered through the church's front doors, carrying her exercise equipment and preparing to set up for the 5 a.m. class that several of her regular clients were planning to attend. The surveillance footage captured her entering the building, though police have never released this particular segment of video to the public. It would be the last time anyone would see Missy Bevers alive. What happened next remains one of the most haunting aspects of this case. Missy encountered the intruder somewhere within the church's corridors, and a violent confrontation ensued. Police believe the encounter was brief but devastating. The suspect, armed with the tools they had been carrying throughout the building, caused Missy fatal injuries. The attack was focused and deliberate, suggesting this was not a random act of violence, but something much more personal and calculated. At 5 a.m., Missy's fitness class participants began arriving at the church for their scheduled workout. The first student to arrive found the front doors unlocked, which was unusual but not necessarily alarming, since Missy typically arrived early to set up. However, when they entered the building and began looking for their instructor, they made a discovery that would haunt them forever. They found Missy no longer alive, lying among broken glass and scattered equipment in one of the church's hallways. The scene was immediately secured, and emergency responders were called at 5:06 a.m. Paramedics and police officers arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Missy Bevers was pronounced deceased at the scene. Authorities later confirmed that her injuries matched the type of tools the suspect had been carrying in the surveillance footage. A hammer and other implements were found nearby, though police have never confirmed which specific tool was used in the attack. The investigation into Missy's tragic end began immediately, with Midlothian police working around the clock to process the crime scene and analyze the evidence. Detective work revealed that nothing appeared to be missing from the church, ruling out robbery as a motive. Missy's personal belongings, including her purse and iPad, were left untouched. This discovery supported the theory that the break-in was staged to disguise the real motive for the crime. One of the first steps in the investigation was examining Missy's personal life and relationships. Police discovered that she had received what were described as creepy and strange messages from an unknown male on LinkedIn in the months before her passing. Investigators tracked down this person of interest and interviewed him extensively, but he maintained that the conversations were merely flirtatious and harmless. While the messages were concerning, police found no evidence directly linking this individual to the crime. The investigation naturally focused on those closest to Missy, beginning with her immediate family. Brandon Bevers, her husband, was questioned extensively about his whereabouts on the morning of April 18th. However, he had what investigators described as an airtight alibi. He was over 600 miles away on a fishing trip in Mississippi with friends. Multiple witnesses and electronic records confirmed his location, making it impossible for him to have been involved in the physical attack on his wife. Similarly, Brandon's father, Randy Bevers, came under scrutiny during the investigation. Randy had been traveling in California at the time of the crime, with his alibi also confirmed through multiple sources, including social media posts showing him at a golf course in Oceanside with other people present. However, suspicions were briefly raised when a search warrant revealed that Randy had taken a shirt with blood on it to a dry cleaner 4 days after Missy's tragic end. When questioned about this, Randy explained that the blood came from breaking up a fight between 2 family dogs, including a Chihuahua. Forensic testing of the shirt confirmed the presence of dog blood and the absence of human blood, corroborating his explanation. As the investigation continued, police expanded their search beyond the immediate family. In May 2016, they announced that none of Missy's family members, including Brandon, were considered suspects or persons of interest in the case. This statement was meant to clear the air and allow investigators to focus on other potential leads, but it also highlighted how little progress had been made in identifying the actual perpetrator. One significant development came when police discovered additional surveillance footage from a nearby business. The footage showed a 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima with what appeared to be an oval bumper sticker, driving very slowly around the closed businesses near the church in the early morning hours of April 18th. The car's behavior was highly unusual and suspicious. The driver was seen turning the headlights on and off repeatedly, circling parking lots, and at one point parking for several minutes under a light before driving away. The timing of this activity, occurring just hours before Missy's tragic end, was too coincidental to ignore. Despite releasing images of the vehicle and making public appeals for information, police were never able to identify the driver of the Nissan Altima. The car and its occupant remained as mysterious as the person captured on the church's surveillance footage. Investigators could not definitively establish whether the vehicle was connected to the crime, but its presence in the area during such a crucial time window made it a priority in their investigation. As months passed without an arrest, the reward money for information leading to the killer's capture continued to grow. What started as a $10,000 reward eventually increased to $20,000, then $50,000, and by 2021 had reached $150,000. The substantial reward reflected both the community's determination to see justice served and the frustration felt by law enforcement as leads continued to run cold. The case received extensive media coverage, with the haunting surveillance footage of the suspect in tactical gear being broadcast across the nation. The image of this mysterious figure walking through the church hallways became iconic, representing not just Missy's tragic story, but the broader issue of unsolved violent crimes that leave families without closure. True crime enthusiasts and amateur investigators analyzed every frame of the footage, proposing theories and potential clues, but none led to a breakthrough in the case. Years have passed since that tragic morning in Midlothian, and the investigation remains active but unsolved. The Midlothian Police Department continues to receive tips about the case on a daily basis, according to their statements. Each piece of information is carefully evaluated, but so far none have provided the crucial evidence needed to identify and arrest Missy's attacker. The case has been featured in numerous true crime podcasts, television shows, and online forums, keeping public attention focused on the search for answers. The impact on Missy's family has been profound and lasting. Brandon Bevers has spoken publicly about his disbelief that the case remains unsolved after so many years, expressing his hope that someone will eventually come forward with the information needed to bring the killer to justice. Their 3 daughters have had to grow up without their mother, carrying the additional burden of knowing that the person responsible for their loss is still free. The family has worked to keep Missy's memory alive while advocating for continued attention to the case. The Creekside Church of Christ, where Missy held her final fitness class, has had to heal from the trauma of having such violence occur within their walls. The congregation has worked to move forward while honoring Missy's memory and supporting her family through their grief. The church community, which had welcomed Missy's fitness classes as a positive addition to their ministry, has had to reconcile their mission of love and peace with the brutal reality of what happened in their sanctuary. For the investigators who have worked this case over the years, the lack of resolution represents one of their most challenging professional experiences. Despite having surveillance footage of the suspect, advanced forensic techniques, and thousands of tips from the public, they have been unable to make the connections necessary to solve the crime. The case serves as a reminder of how even with modern technology and investigative methods, some criminals manage to evade justice. The mystery of who ended Missy Bevers' life continues to haunt everyone touched by this case. Somewhere, the person captured in that surveillance footage is living with the knowledge of what they did in the early morning hours of April 18, 2016. The tactical gear, the calculated timing, and the staged burglary all suggest someone who planned this crime carefully and has managed to keep their secret for years. As the case approaches its 9th year without resolution, Missy's story serves as both a tribute to a life cut tragically short and a call for continued vigilance in the search for justice. Her legacy lives on through her daughters, who carry forward her spirit of helping others, and through the fitness community that remembers her dedication and positive impact on so many lives. The loss of Missy Bevers represents more than just another unsolved case. It's a reminder of how violence can shatter the lives of good people who are simply trying to make their community a better place. Her family continues to hold on to hope that someday someone will provide the crucial piece of information that finally brings her killer to justice and allows them to find the peace that has eluded them for so long. The silent tragedy of Shayla Gutierrez. Shayla Lisbeth Gutierrez Rosillo was just 33 years old when her life was cut short in ways that no mother should ever endure. She was a woman who carried the hopes and dreams of her 3 children in her heart, living thousands of miles away from her family in Peru, while building what she believed would be a better future in Lancaster, California. But beneath the surface of her American dream lay a darkness that her family could never have imagined. The story of Shayla's final days reveals a pattern of fear, control, and desperation that ultimately led to an unthinkable tragedy that would echo across 2 countries. Born in Peru, Shayla had made the difficult decision to leave her homeland behind and immigrate to the United States with her partner, 36-year-old Josima Cabrera. Like so many families seeking opportunity, they settled in Lancaster, a small community in Los Angeles County, where they hoped to raise their 3 young children in safety and prosperity. Shayla worked hard to support her family, earning the respect and love of neighbors who would later describe her as an unconditional friend, a devoted mother, and someone who never stopped striving to create a better life for those she loved. Her children became the center of her world, and she maintained close contact with her mother, Helga Rosillo, back in Peru, sharing the joys and struggles of life as an immigrant mother trying to make ends meet. But the relationship between Shayla and Josima was far from the peaceful family life she had envisioned. According to her sister, Jessie Gutierrez, their home had become a place of constant surveillance and psychological pressure. Jossamer had installed multiple security cameras throughout their apartment, including one in their bedroom, creating an environment where Shayla's every movement was monitored and recorded. Jessie revealed through emotional testimony that her sister had confided in close friends about the threatening behavior she was experiencing. In private conversations with trusted companions, Shayla had shared that Jossamer would threaten to release intimate videos and photos of her if she didn't comply with his demands. The cameras that were meant to provide security had instead become tools of control and intimidation. The pattern of abuse extended far beyond just surveillance. Jessie described how Jossamer would regularly destroy Shayla's cell phones, keeping her isolated from family and friends by controlling her communication with the outside world. He would take her SIM cards, review her messages and calls, and force her to change phone numbers constantly, making it nearly impossible for her family in Peru to maintain consistent contact. Even when Jossamer traveled between the United States and Mexico, and eventually to Peru, he somehow maintained access to Shayla's old phone numbers, using them to monitor her social media activity and track her interactions with relatives and friends. This level of control had effectively trapped Shayla in what her sister described as a situation of captivity within her own home. The frightening reality of Shayla's situation became even clearer when her family learned about her previous attempts to seek help. Her mother, Helga Rosillo, revealed that Shayla had already reported Jossamer for domestic violence while they were still living in Peru. This earlier incident showed that the pattern of abusive behavior had been ongoing for years, following them across international borders. Even more heartbreaking was the revelation that during their last conversation, Shayla had told her mother that she was planning to file another report against Jossamer with the authorities in Lancaster. She had finally found the courage to reach out for help again, but tragically, she would never get the chance to follow through on that plan. On August 9, 2024, Shayla Gutierrez disappeared from her home in Lancaster. When family and friends tried to reach her, they were met with silence, and their growing concern quickly turned to alarm when Jossamer began providing conflicting and increasingly suspicious explanations for her absence. According to her sister, he initially claimed that immigration and customs enforcement officers had taken Shayla into custody. When pressed for more details, he changed his story completely, telling people that she had run away with another man. In a third version of events, he said she had been involved in some kind of accident. Each new explanation contradicted the previous one, raising red flags for anyone who knew Shayla's character and her devotion to her children. As the days passed without any word from Shayla, her absence became impossible to explain away. Neighbors in Lancaster began to take notice, and one resident made a discovery that would prove crucial to the investigation. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood captured concerning images of Jossamer dragging something large and wrapped in fabric from their home. The timestamp on the video placed this activity during the period when Shayla had supposedly disappeared, and the size and shape of what he was moving raised immediate concerns about what had happened to her. On August 16, 2024, just 1 week after Shayla was reported missing, her remains were discovered in the Angels National Forest. Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigators found her over the side of an embankment, wrapped in material that appeared similar to the fabric captured in the neighbor's surveillance video. The location was remote and difficult to access, suggesting that whoever had placed her there had specifically chosen the spot to avoid discovery. The way her remains had been left and the circumstances of their discovery painted a picture of deliberate concealment that sent shock waves through both the Lancaster community and her family back in Peru. By the time authorities had identified Shayla's remains and begun focusing their investigation on Jossamer as the primary suspect, he had already fled the United States. According to the Peruvian consulate, he had traveled from California to Peru, taking the couple's 3 young children with him. The consulate confirmed that Peruvian authorities were unable to detain him upon his arrival because there was no active warrant for his arrest at the time he entered the country. This timing allowed him to disappear into Peru with the children, creating an international custody situation that would complicate efforts to bring him to justice and ensure the safety of Shayla's children. The legal proceedings that followed revealed the full extent of the evidence against Josima. During a detention hearing in Peru, prosecutors presented details about what they believed had happened between August 9 and 10, 2024. According to the prosecution's case, Josima had subjected Shayla to a fatal attack with a knife. The motive, investigators suggested, may have been related to suspicions of infidelity or disputes over money. The forensic evidence collected, including fingerprint analysis and DNA testing, confirmed that the remains found in the Angels National Forest were indeed those of Shayla Gutierrez. The prosecution's presentation during the detention hearing painted a methodical picture of how the crime had been carried out and concealed. After the incident in their home, investigators believe Josima moved Shayla to the garage, where he placed her in the trunk of his vehicle. He then drove to the remote location in the Angels National Forest, where he left her remains wrapped in the green fabric that would later be captured in the surveillance footage. The level of planning and the efforts to conceal the crime demonstrated a calculated attempt to avoid detection and escape accountability. During the court proceedings in Peru, Josima's defense team was unable to present evidence of strong community ties that might argue against his detention. The judge, considering the severity of the charges and the potential penalties he would face if extradited to California, where such crimes can carry a life sentence, ordered 9 months of preventive detention. The ruling, issued on August 27, 2025, would keep Josima in Peruvian custody until May 26, 2026, while legal proceedings continued regarding potential extradition to the United States. Throughout the legal proceedings, Shayla's family worked tirelessly to ensure that her children would be protected and cared for properly. After complex negotiations involving multiple government agencies, the 3 children were eventually repatriated to Peru and placed in the care of their maternal grandmother, Helga Rosillo. The Minister of Women in Peru confirmed that the children had arrived safely on a commercial flight, with coordination between the Foreign Ministry and other agencies to ensure their well-being during this traumatic transition. The impact of Shayla's loss extended far beyond her immediate family, touching an entire community that had come to know her as a kind and hard-working mother. In Lancaster, friends and neighbors organized a vigil in her memory, holding signs that read "Justice for Shayla" and "Not one more." The gathering brought together women and families who had known her, creating a space for grief and solidarity in the face of an unthinkable tragedy. Those who spoke at the vigil remembered her as someone who had always been there for others, despite being so far from her own family support system. The international nature of the case has created ongoing challenges for investigators and prosecutors working to ensure justice for Shayla. The Foreign Ministry of Peru has been working with U.S. authorities to coordinate the legal proceedings and address the extradition process. Meanwhile, Shayla's family continues to advocate for justice while caring for her children, who are still learning to process the magnitude of their loss and the dramatic changes in their lives. Helga Rosillo, speaking through her grief, expressed the heartbreaking reality of trying to stay strong for her grandchildren while processing the loss of her daughter. "I'm very depressed, but I have to be strong for my grandchildren," she said, capturing the impossible burden that falls on families when domestic violence escalates to its most tragic conclusion. Her words reflect the ripple effects of such crimes, which destroy not just the immediate victim, but entire networks of people who loved and depended on them. The case of Shayla Gutierrez serves as a stark reminder of how domestic violence can escalate in isolation, particularly for immigrant women who may have limited support systems and face additional barriers to seeking help. Her sister's testimony about the surveillance, threats, and control she experienced illustrates the complex web of abuse that can trap victims and make escape seem impossible. The fact that Shayla had previously reported domestic violence and was planning to do so again shows both her courage and the tragic reality that the system she was trying to reach for help was unable to protect her in time. As legal proceedings continue in both Peru and the United States, Shayla's family holds on to hope that justice will ultimately be served and that her 3 children will grow up knowing their mother fought for a better life for them. The loss of Shayla Gutierrez represents not just a personal tragedy for her loved ones, but a reminder of the urgent need for stronger protections for victims of domestic violence, particularly those who find themselves isolated by distance, language barriers, or immigration status. Her memory lives on in the love she gave her children and the community that now stands together demanding justice in her name. The disappearance of Asha Degree. Harold and Aquila Degree married on Valentine's Day in 1988, and their love story seemed destined for happiness. Their son, O'Brien, arrived a year later, and Asha was born in 1990. The family made their home on Oakcrest Drive in a quiet residential subdivision north of Shelby, North Carolina, where they built a life centered around faith, family, and hard work. Harold worked as a dock loader at Pittsburgh Plate Glass, while Aquila dedicated her days to building pianos at Kauai America Manufacturing. They were parents who believed in structure, in values, and in keeping their children close to home where they could be safe. The Degree household was one where technology took a back seat to connection. There was no computer in their home, a deliberate choice made by parents who had watched too many news stories about strangers targeting children through the internet. Every time you turned on the TV, there was some dangerous person who had lured somebody's child away via the internet, Aquila would later recall. Their world revolved around extended family, church, and school, creating what they believed was a protective circle around their children. Asha thrived in this environment, content to stay within the boundaries her parents had lovingly established. At 9 years old, Asha was everything parents hoped their daughter would be. She was cautious by nature, shy but friendly, and devoted to her family. Her teacher and classmates at Falston Elementary School described her as light-hearted and funny, always wearing her hair in pigtails or ponytails, always ready with a smile that could brighten any room. She was the kind of child who made friends easily, who tried to find humor in everyday moments, and who carried herself with the quiet confidence of a child who knew she was loved. Yet there was something tender about Asha too. She was scared to death of dogs, so fearful that her mother never imagined she would venture outside alone. Basketball was Asha's passion, and she poured her competitive spirit into the game with the intensity that only a 9-year-old could muster. She was the star point guard for the Falston Elementary Bulldogs, playing alongside her older brother O'Brien, who shared her love for sports. The family had a basketball goal in their driveway, and the children spent countless hours practicing, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood as they played together in the yard. Asha's dedication to basketball was more than just a hobby. It was part of who she was, part of the joy she brought to everything she touched. The weekend of February 11, 2000 began like so many others. Cleveland County schools were closed that Friday, but Harold and Aquila still had to work, so the children spent the day with their aunt in the same neighborhood. From there, they went to their youth basketball practices at school, maintaining the routine that gave structure to their lives. The following day brought Asha's basketball game, and for the first time that season, her team faced defeat. What made it worse was that Asha had fouled out, unable to finish the game alongside her teammates. The disappointment was crushing for a competitive 9-year-old, and she cried along with her teammates after the loss. But by the time her brother's game began later that day, she seemed to have recovered, watching and cheering as if the earlier disappointment had passed. Sunday, February 13, unfolded with the familiar rhythm of faith and family. The children went to church from a relative's house before returning home to spend the evening together. Around 8 o'clock that night, both Ashar and O'Brien settled into the bedroom they shared, preparing for what should have been an ordinary school night. Almost an hour later, the power went out in their neighborhood after a car accident nearby, plunging their home into unexpected darkness. When electricity returned at 12:30 in the morning, Harold checked on his children and found both Ashar and O'Brien sleeping peacefully in their beds. He checked again at 2:30 a.m., just before going to bed himself, and once more saw his children safe in their room. What happened next would haunt the Degree family forever. Shortly after Harold's final check, O'Brien heard the sound of Ashar's bed creaking. In his sleepy state, he assumed she was simply changing positions and didn't think to investigate further. But Ashar wasn't adjusting her position in sleep. She was getting up, gathering a book bag she had apparently packed with several sets of clothes and personal items, and preparing to leave the only home she had ever known. Sometime around 3:45 to 4:15 that morning, in the midst of a raging storm, 9-year-old Ashar Degree walked out of her house and began making her way south along Highway 18. Two witnesses would later report seeing something that defied all logic: a small child walking alone in the early morning hours through driving rain and wind. A truck driver and another motorist spotted her wearing a long-sleeved white t-shirt and white pants, a tiny figure battling the elements on a dark highway. The sight was so unusual, so troubling, that one of the witnesses turned his car around, circling back because he thought it was strange such a small child would be out by herself at that hour. But when he approached, something spooked Ashar, and she ran from the roadside into the dense woods, disappearing from sight. The witness would later tell police there was a storm raging when he saw her, making the image of that small child even more heartbreaking. Morning came with the routine that had shaped the Degree household for years. At 5:45 a.m., Aquila awoke to prepare her children for school, planning to draw them a bath since they hadn't been able to bathe the night before due to the power outage. When she opened the door to the children's room to wake them before their 6:30 alarm, O'Brien was in his bed as expected, but Ashar's bed was empty. Aquila searched the house, checked the family cars, called Harold's mother across the street, but Ashar was nowhere to be found. That's when I went into panic mode, Aquila would later remember. She heard a car next door, quickly put on shoes and ran outside, her mother's voice on the phone telling her to call the police. By 6:40 that morning, the first police officers had arrived, and the search for Ashar Degree began. Police dogs were brought to the scene, but couldn't pick up her scent. Aquila went through the neighborhood calling her daughter's name, her voice awakening everyone by 7 o'clock. Friends, family, and neighbors abandoned their Valentine's Day plans to join the search, while pastors from area churches came to support the grieving family. The initial search yielded almost nothing, only a mitten that Aquila said didn't belong to her daughter, noting that no winter clothing had been taken from their home. The breakthrough came when local news coverage prompted the two drivers who had seen Ashar on the highway to contact police. Their testimony confirmed the impossible, that 9-year-old Ashar had indeed been walking alone in the storm, that she had been spooked by an approaching car and fled into the woods. County Sheriff Dan Crawford told the media, "We're pretty sure it was her because the descriptions they gave are consistent with what we know she was wearing." The sightings gave searchers a starting point, but they also deepened the mystery of why a shy, cautious child would venture out into such dangerous conditions. On February 15, searchers made their first significant discovery. In a shed at a nearby business along the highway, near where Ashar had been seen running into the woods, they found candy wrappers, a pencil, a green marker, and a yellow hair bow that Ashar's parents identified as belonging to their daughter. Also found was a photograph of a black girl around Ashar's age, a girl who has never been identified and whose connection to the case remains a mystery. It was a haunting discovery, suggesting that Ashar had sought shelter in that shed, but it raised more questions than it answered. The following day brought another realization that cut straight to the heart. Aquila discovered that Ashar's bedroom was missing her favorite clothing, including a pair of blue jeans with a red stripe. It became clear that Ashar hadn't left on a whim. She had planned this departure, packing her belongings over several days leading up to her disappearance. "She's not your typical runaway," observed SBI agent Bart Burpo. The evidence suggested preparation, but no one could understand what would drive a 9-year-old to leave the safety of her home in the middle of a storm. After a week of intensive searching involving 9,000 man-hours, covering a 2-3-mile radius around where she was last seen, and investigating 300 leads ranging from possible sightings to tips about abandoned houses and wells, the active search was called off. Sheriff Crawford admitted at a news conference, "We have never really had that first good, substantial lead," and urged the media to keep a Shaz story alive. The FBI and North Carolina's State Bureau of Investigation joined the case, adding her to their databases of missing children, but the trail had gone cold. In the months and years that followed, the Degree family refused to let a Shaz memory fade. The case gained national attention, with the family appearing on the Montel Williams show, America's Most Wanted, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. A full-size color billboard featuring a Shaz image was erected along Highway 18 near where she was last seen, serving as a constant reminder that someone, somewhere, knew what happened to her. The family established a scholarship in her name and hosted annual walks from their home to the billboard, determined to keep her story in the public consciousness. The first major break in the case came in August 2001, when construction workers found a Shaz book bag wrapped in 2 black trash bags along Highway 18 in Burke County, about 26 miles north of Shelby. The bag contained items that deepened the mystery: a copy of Dr. Seuss's McElligot's Pool from her elementary school library, and a T-shirt depicting the band New Kids on the Block. Neither item had belonged to a Shah before her disappearance, suggesting someone else had placed them in her bag. The discovery gave investigators evidence to analyze, but it also confirmed their worst fears about what might have happened to her. For more than 2 decades, the case remained frustratingly stagnant. Leads turned into dead ends, tips proved false, and the Degree family lived with the unbearable uncertainty of not knowing their daughter's fate. Aquila spoke candidly about the additional pain of feeling that a Shaz case didn't receive the attention it deserved because she was black. "Missing white children get more attention. I don't understand why," she said in a 2013 interview. "I know if you ask them, they will say it's not racial. Oh, really? I'm not going to argue because I have common sense." In 2015, the FBI announced they were re-examining the case with fresh eyes, offering a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction. A year later, they disclosed a potential new lead. A Shah may have been seen getting into a dark green early 1970s Lincoln Continental Mark IV or Ford Thunderbird with rust around its wheel wells. The announcement sparked renewed hope, but still, no definitive answers emerged. The case took a dramatic turn in September 2024 when the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office and FBI executed search warrants on property owned by Roy and Connie Dedman. For the first time, investigators publicly indicated they believed a Shah had been the victim of foul play and that her remains had been hidden. The search warrant identified the Dedman family as suspects, including their 3 daughters who were teenagers at the time of a Shah's disappearance: Annalie Victoria Dedman Ramirez, Lizzie Dedman Foster, and Sarah Dedman Capel. The evidence against the family became more troubling with each revelation. DNA analysis indicated that genetic material found on a Shah's undershirt was identical to DNA from Annalie Dedman Ramirez. Text messages between the sisters, obtained through search warrants, revealed troubling communications. After consulting with their family's attorney, Lizzie Foster had texted her sister Sarah saying, "I just talked to David Teddy, and the theory is I did it by accident and covered it up." Sarah's response was equally telling. "Why would it be you?" Foster also sent messages expressing worry and fear, texting, "I'm just so worried, so worried, and I don't know what to do. I caused this." Perhaps most striking was the testimony of a witness who came forward after the September 2024 searches. He reported attending parties with the Deadman sisters in the mid-2000s and recalled a night when he saw Lizzie Foster sobbing and extremely intoxicated. According to his account, she confessed, saying, "I was responsible for what happened to a Shah Degree." He described how Sarah Deadman Capel immediately told her sister to shut up, appearing distressed in a way that was unusual for her typically calm demeanor. The witness underwent a polygraph test regarding his statement and passed, though such results are not admissible in North Carolina courts. The investigation revealed evidence that Roy Deadman and his daughters may have obstructed justice in the case. Given that the daughters were minors at the time of Ashah's disappearance, investigators suggested that adult assistance from Roy and Connie Deadman would have been necessary for carrying out or concealing any crime. When approached by law enforcement in 2024, Lizzie Foster initially declined to take a polygraph test, but became emotional and agreed when reapproached. She was asked about concealing information and was found to be deceptive. Sarah Deadman Capel declined to be interviewed. The family's attorney, David Teddy, held a press conference addressing what he called the rampant conjecture and speculation in our community. He maintained that the Deadman family, just like the rest of us, didn't know what happened to Ashah and urged the public to refrain from speculation until verified facts emerged. Despite the mounting evidence, no arrests have been made, and the family continues to deny any involvement in Ashah's disappearance. Throughout 2025, the investigation continued to intensify. In February, 3 new search warrants were executed, seizing cell phones from Roy Deadman and 2 of his daughters. In April, investigators searched another property, once owned by a prominent figure in the investigation. The reward money increased to $75,000 as authorities announced they had re-examined evidence using cutting-edge technology and were making substantial progress in the case. As the 25th anniversary of Ashah's disappearance passed in February 2025, her parents continued to hold on to hope while grappling with the growing evidence that their daughter had lost her life due to the actions of others. Aquila's words from years earlier still echo with heartbreaking relevance. "She was 9 years old, and she'll be 30 this year, so we've missed everything. But I don't care. If she walked in the door right now, I wouldn't care what I missed. All I want to do is see her." Pictures of Ashah, both real and age-progressed images showing how she might look today, still decorate the Degree family home, where her parents maintain their vigil of hope against increasingly overwhelming evidence of loss. The case of Ashah Degree remains a testament to a family's unbreakable love and a community's refusal to forget a little girl who disappeared into a stormy night 25 years ago. While the investigation continues and justice remains elusive, Ashah's memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew her and in the determination of investigators who refuse to let her story end without answers. For Harold and Aquila Degree, and for everyone touched by this tragedy, the search for truth continues, carrying with it the hope that someday, somehow, Ashah will finally come home. The murder of Fawn Marie Cox. In the summer of 1989, 16-year-old Fawn Marie Cox was living a typical teenage life in Kansas City, Missouri. She shared a home near 9th and Van Brunt with her parents and her younger sister Felicia. The Cox family was close-knit, and Fawn was known for her bright spirit and dedication to her work at Worlds of Fun, the local amusement park. She was the kind of daughter who came home tired from late shifts but always looked forward to the next day. On the evening of July 26, 1989, Fawn returned home from her job at Worlds of Fun around 11 p.m. It had been another long shift, but she was already thinking about returning to work the next morning. That night was particularly hot and humid, making the second-floor bedroom she normally shared with her younger sister Felicia uncomfortable. The family had made adjustments to stay cool, with the parents sleeping downstairs where their working air conditioner provided relief from the oppressive heat. Felicia had also chosen to sleep on the first floor that night, leaving Fawn alone in the upstairs bedroom. Her younger sister Amber was not home that evening, as she had been hired to babysit for someone nearby. Fawn climbed the stairs to her second-floor bedroom, knowing she needed a good night's rest before another day of work. She settled into bed in the room that offered her privacy, but also, unknowingly, made her vulnerable. The family's decision to sleep downstairs due to the heat would prove to be a tragic circumstance that no one could have foreseen. While the Cox family slept peacefully on the first floor, someone with intimate knowledge of their home and routines was preparing to commit an unthinkable act. The perpetrator knew exactly where Fawn's bedroom was located and understood how to access the second-story window without detection. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity, but rather a calculated act by someone who had been to the house before and was familiar with the family's living arrangements. In the early hours of July 27, 1989, someone climbed up to Fawn's second-story bedroom window and broke inside. The family dog had been agitated during the night, but this was dismissed because the animal was pregnant. The air conditioning units running throughout the house masked any sounds that might have alerted the family to the tragedy taking place upstairs. Fawn was attacked and lost her life due to the actions of her intruder, who left behind evidence that would remain a mystery for more than 3 decades. When morning came on July 27, Fawn's alarm clock began ringing at 9 a.m., signaling it was time for her to get ready for another shift at Worlds of Fun. But the alarm continued to sound, and Fawn didn't turn it off as she normally would. Her mother and younger sister Felicia went upstairs to investigate why Fawn wasn't responding to her alarm. What they discovered in that bedroom would haunt them forever. Fawn was lying motionless on her bed, and there were clear signs that she had been harmed. I went over to shake her. "Come on, get up." But she had been gone for a while, Felicia Cox later remembered. The family immediately called for an ambulance, but it was clear that Fawn had passed away hours earlier. Medical professionals who examined her determined that she had lost her life due to strangulation and had been attacked by her assailant. The Kansas City Police Department immediately launched an investigation into what they recognized as a deeply disturbing crime. This one touched a lot of people, because she was an innocent child who lost her life in her own bed, said Captain Ben Caldwell, who later served as supervisor of the missing persons cold case section. It rattled detectives and officers who worked it for decades. The crime scene investigators collected crucial evidence, including DNA material that would prove to be the key to solving the case more than 30 years later. Initially, the investigation focused on 2 teenage suspects who were charged in connection with Fawn's death. These young men had some connection to the Cox family and seemed to have knowledge of the house's layout. However, the case against them quickly fell apart when the key witness recanted their statement and admitted to being untruthful. The charges against the juveniles were dropped, leaving detectives without clear suspects and a grieving family without answers. The initial detectives worked the case into the ground, Captain Caldwell later recalled, running down every possible lead. In 1989, the technology available to analyze the biological evidence was extremely limited. Crime scene investigators had collected DNA material from the scene, but all they could do at the time was attempt to compare blood types. The evidence was carefully preserved, though no one realized just how valuable it would become decades later. As the years passed, the Cox family never gave up hope that Fawn's case would be solved. They remained in contact with detectives and provided any assistance they could to the ongoing investigation. Both of Fawn's parents continued to live with the pain of their daughter's unsolved case, always wondering who had been responsible for taking her life. In the first decade of the 2000s, advances in DNA technology allowed KCPD crime lab scientists to develop a suspect DNA profile from the preserved material collected since 1989. They uploaded this profile to the National CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, database, the criminal justice DNA database used across the country. Despite their hopes, there was no match in the system. KCPD detectives continued to explore any possible leads as the years went on. As recently as 2 years before the case was finally solved, they re-interviewed the former juvenile suspects who had initially been charged and obtained DNA samples from them. Those samples didn't match the DNA profile from the crime scene either, confirming that the original suspects had been wrongly accused. The breakthrough in Fawn's case came during the summer of 2020, when Operation Legend brought federal resources to Kansas City to help solve violent crimes. Detectives identified Cox's case as a candidate for a cutting-edge type of DNA identification called genealogical DNA testing. This technology allows law enforcement to compare an unknown suspect's DNA profile to public genealogical databases and build a family tree, creating a small pool of potential suspects. The technique had already proven successful in solving high-profile cold cases like that of the Golden State serial killer in California. Captain Caldwell had known that Cox's case could likely be solved with this technology, but there had been significant barriers involving cost, protocol, and manpower. The federal resources and expertise that came with Operation Legend finally overcame those hurdles. The FBI even covered the cost of the expensive testing, as it was beyond KCPD's budget. Using the genealogical DNA results, detectives narrowed their focus to a suspect who was both shocking and tragically familiar to the Cox family. The DNA evidence pointed to Fawn's own cousin, Donald Cox Jr., who was about 5 years older than her. Donald had passed away in 2006, but under circumstances that had raised enough suspicion for the medical examiner to investigate and retain a blood sample. Crime lab staff extracted DNA from Donald's preserved blood sample and compared it to the DNA profile from the material recovered at the original crime scene in 1989. The results were conclusive. It was a match. After more than 30 years, the person responsible for Fawn's death had been identified, and it was someone the family had known and trusted. On November 10, 2020, detectives informed Fawn's family of the stunning news. Both of her parents were still living, and Captain Caldwell said they were sad, but relieved to finally have answers. In a heartbreaking revelation, they told detectives that they had sometimes wondered whether Donald could have been responsible for their daughter's death. "It's a relief there's closure," said Felicia Cox, Fawn's sister, when the news was announced. "The answers aren't always what we were asking for, but there's closure." The revelation that the perpetrator was a relative made the discovery particularly difficult for the family to process. The fact that it's someone that you know well and it's actually a relative, how is the family dealing with that? A reporter asked. "I think we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Just having answers helps," Felicia responded. The family had always suspected that Fawn's attacker was someone known to her, which explained how he was able to access her bedroom window without detection, and why Fawn never called for help during the attack. Donald had been a frequent visitor to the Cox home, giving him intimate knowledge of the house's layout and the family's routines. This familiarity had allowed him to commit his crime and escape undetected while the rest of the family slept downstairs. The revelation about Donald's involvement raised questions about whether he had acted alone or if others had been present that night. Some evidence suggested that the original juvenile suspects may have been in the house during the evening hours when the crime occurred. However, no further charges were brought against anyone else, and law enforcement concluded their investigation. Felicia Cox stated that it would be of no use to pursue confessions from the original suspects, suggesting that Donald may have acted alone at the crucial moment. The original suspicion against the juvenile suspects had stemmed from a Nintendo gaming system that had been reported stolen from Fawn's home and was later found among the belongings of one of the young men. This had led police to initially focus on them as the primary suspects. However, the DNA evidence definitively proved that Donald Cox Jr. was responsible for the most serious aspects of the crime. Donald Cox Jr. had lived with the secret of his crime for 17 years after Fawn's death, maintaining contact with his family and appearing to live a normal life. However, his struggles with substance use eventually led to his own demise in 2006, when he passed away due to an overdose. His death meant that he would never face justice in a courtroom for what he had done to his young cousin. The case officially closed with Donald's identification as the perpetrator, but there would be no trial, no sentencing, and no opportunity for the family to confront their daughter's attacker. Somebody's out there living a normal life that she never got to live. She never got to grow up and do the things that we're doing now, one family member had said before the case was solved, expressing the frustration of decades without answers. Captain Caldwell noted that genealogical DNA testing could be a tremendous tool for solving cold cases, but the cost and manpower involved remained significant barriers for many police departments. He expressed hope that sustainable funding could be established to bring this technology to more unsolved cases, potentially bringing justice to other families who had been denied answers for years. For the Cox family, the resolution of Fawn's case brought a mixture of relief and renewed grief. After 31 years of wondering who had taken their daughter's life, they finally had the truth, even though it was more painful than they had imagined. The knowledge that someone they had known and trusted could commit such an act against 16-year-old Fawn was devastating, but it also provided the closure they had sought for so many years. The murder of Fawn Marie Cox stands as a reminder of how advances in forensic science can bring justice even decades after a crime has been committed. It also highlights the importance of preserving evidence and never giving up on cases that seem unsolvable. While Fawn never received the justice of seeing her attacker face trial, her family finally received the answers they had fought so hard to obtain. The case serves as a testament to the dedication of law enforcement officers who never forgot about Fawn Cox, even as decades passed without resolution. Their commitment to her memory and their persistence in seeking justice ultimately led to the identification of her killer, providing her family with the closure they desperately needed after more than 3 decades of pain and uncertainty. The Anna Jean Kane case, a daughter's 34-year wait for justice. Anna Jean Kane was 26 years old when her life was taken from her, leaving behind 3 young children and a mystery that would span more than 3 decades. The mother from Reading, Pennsylvania, had been working to rebuild her life, having moved from Reading to the nearby town of Birdsboro shortly before her tragic end. Her daughter Tamika Reyes was only 9 years old at the time, while her brothers were even younger. I was lucky enough to at least know her and get a little time with her, but my brothers don't remember her, Reyes would later reflect, carrying the weight of memories her siblings would never have. The Kane family had faced its share of struggles. Anna had passed issues with substance abuse and charges related to working as a sex worker in the Reading area, a fact that investigators would later suggest may have connected her to her eventual attacker. Despite these challenges, those who truly knew Anna understood she was much more than the labels that would follow her in death. She was described by her daughter as loving, caring, outgoing, and honest, a woman who did not deserve the fate that awaited her. The family structure was complicated by Anna's circumstances, but her children remained the center of her world, even as she navigated the difficult realities of life in the late 1980s. On the evening of October 22, 1988, Anna Kane left her home in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania, for what would be the last time. The exact details of her final hours remain largely unknown, as investigators were never able to piece together a complete timeline of her movements that night. What is certain is that somewhere during those dark hours, Anna encountered the person who would take her life. The circumstances of their meeting, whether by chance or arrangement, would remain one of the many questions that haunted investigators for decades to come. The following morning, October 23, 1988, Anna's body was discovered along the Ontelawney Trail near Route 662 in Perry Township, Berks County. The scene suggested that her life had been taken deliberately. Anna had been harmed before being strangled with a length of baling twine that was still wrapped around her neck when she was found. The coroner, William R. Fatora, confirmed that Anna had died from strangulation noting visible injuries that indicated she had fought desperately against her attacker. She was choked to death by a rope. It is a homicide and is being handled as such, Fatora stated grimly. The evidence at the scene told investigators that Anna had not lost her life where she was found. Fatora explained the key detail that led to this conclusion. We're assuming the incident occurred within 12 hours. The ground was wet beneath her, and yet her clothing was not wet, and it stopped raining around midnight on Saturday. This meant that Anna had been taken elsewhere, attacked, and then transporting to the wooded trail where her remains were deliberately placed. The killer had chosen this remote location, perhaps believing it would delay discovery or complicate the investigation. Pennsylvania State Police immediately launched a comprehensive investigation into Anna's case. DNA evidence was carefully collected from her clothing and preserved, representing cutting-edge forensic technology for 1988. When the samples were tested, they revealed an undetermined male DNA profile, but without a database to compare it against, the evidence could only wait for future advances in technology. Investigators canvassed the area, interviewed potential witnesses, and followed every lead, but the case began to grow cold as months passed without a breakthrough. The investigation took an unexpected turn nearly 2 years later, when the Reading Eagle newspaper decided to bring renewed attention to Anna's case. In 1990, the paper published a front-page story about her death, featuring her photograph and appealing to the public for any information that might help solve the case. The response they received was both promising and chilling. In February 1990, the newspaper received an anonymous letter that would become a crucial piece of evidence, though its significance wouldn't be fully understood for more than 3 decades. The letter was signed simply, "Concerned Citizen," but its contents immediately caught the attention of investigators. State Police Trooper Daniel Womer later explained the significance. The Reading Eagle received an anonymous letter signed from a concerned citizen that had numerous intimate details about the homicide. The letter contained specific information about how Anna's clothing had been arranged and other details that had never been released to the public. This led investigators to believe that whoever wrote the letter had committed the homicide, Womer stated. What the investigators didn't know at the time was that the letter writer had made a critical mistake. The envelope had been sealed with saliva, and that saliva contained DNA. When the envelope was tested years later, it would prove to match exactly with the DNA profile found on Anna's clothing. But in 1990, genetic genealogy was still decades away from being developed, and the letter became another piece of evidence waiting for technology to catch up. For Anna's children, particularly her daughter Tamika, the years that followed were filled with unanswered questions and persistent grief. Tamika grew up knowing that somewhere, her mother's attacker was living freely while their family struggled with the loss. "I didn't think I'd see this day, but I had hope. My emotions are all over the place. Happy, sad, angry," Tamika would later say when reflecting on the decades of waiting. The family had to endure not only their personal loss, but also the way Anna was portrayed in media coverage, often reduced to harmful stereotypes rather than being remembered as the mother and person she had been. As the years turned into decades, advances in DNA technology began to offer new hope for cold cases across the country. The Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, was established by the FBI in 1998, creating a national database for DNA profiles. However, Anna's killer's DNA was not in the system, meaning he had likely never been arrested for a qualifying offense or his crimes predated the database. The case remained frustratingly unsolved, but investigators never gave up hope that new technology might eventually provide answers. The breakthrough finally came in 2022 when Pennsylvania State Police decided to utilize genetic genealogy technology on Anna's case. They partnered with Paraben Nanolabs in Virginia, a company specializing in using DNA evidence to identify suspects through family tree analysis. The scientists took the DNA profile from both Anna's clothing and the 1990 letter and began the painstaking process of building family trees to identify potential suspects. After extensive analysis, they determined that Scott Grimm was a possible suspect. Scott Grimm was a native of Hamburg, Pennsylvania, who would have been 26 years old at the time of Anna's death, the same age as Anna herself. By the time investigators identified him as a suspect, however, Grimm had already passed away from natural causes in 2018 at the age of 58. This presented a unique challenge: how to definitively prove that a deceased person was responsible for a crime committed 34 years earlier. The answer lay in obtaining a direct DNA sample from Grimm to compare with the evidence. Investigators were able to collect a direct DNA sample from Scott Grimm, though they did not specify exactly how this was accomplished. The Pennsylvania State Police Crime Laboratory conducted extensive testing, comparing Grimm's DNA to both the evidence from Anna's clothing and the saliva from the 1990 letter envelope. Trooper Womer announced the results. We were able to take the direct sample from Scott Grimm. We had our Pennsylvania State Police Lab do a direct comparison to the DNA from the letter in 1990, as well as the original evidence from the victim's clothing, all of which showed the same contributor being Scott Grimm. His DNA profile was on all of those items. The investigation revealed additional connections that strengthened the case against Grimm. In 2002, he had been arrested by Exeter Township Police in a harassment case where he had mailed threatening letters to a former business partner. This pattern of sending letters containing threats or detailed information about crimes created a disturbing profile of someone who used correspondence to torment others. Investigators found that DNA from the 2002 arrest also matched the profile from Anna's case, providing multiple points of confirmation. On August 18, 2022, Pennsylvania State Police and Berks County District Attorney John Adams held a press conference at the State Police Troop L headquarters in Reading to announce that Anna Kane's case had finally been solved. The announcement brought a mixture of emotions to Anna's family and the community that had never forgotten her. District Attorney Adams acknowledged the bittersweet nature of the resolution. "I know in some respects, since he is deceased, he will never face justice as we all would hope, but we solved it and gave some closure to the family." Captain Robert L. Bailey emphasized the significance of the case beyond just its resolution. This cold case investigation is a prime example of the due diligence of the Pennsylvania State Police and the Berks County District Attorney's Office. Every victim, despite their background, good, bad, or indifferent, deserves closure. I hope this sends a message to the citizens of Berks County. We are willing to do anything in our power to investigate any case that comes our way. His words address the reality that victims like Anna, who faced societal marginalization in life, deserved the same pursuit of justice as any other victim. The investigation continued even after Grimm was identified, as law enforcement worked to understand the connection between him and Anna. Trooper Womer noted that interviews with people who knew Grimm hadn't yet revealed information about a possible relationship with Anna. "That doesn't mean there wasn't some connection we haven't found yet," he explained, adding that given Anna's background as a sex worker, Grimm could have been a client. The exact nature of their encounter that night in October 1988 may never be fully understood, but the scientific evidence left no doubt about who was responsible for Anna's death. For Tamika Reyes, now an adult with children of her own, the news brought the closure she had waited for her entire life. Her response captured the complex emotions of finally having answers while grappling with the reality that true justice would never be served. "I experienced a mix of emotions when I found out. I was relieved to finally have a face to associate with the monster who took her from us, but also upset that he will never face justice." She also expressed sadness for her grandmother, who had passed away before the case was resolved, never knowing who had taken her daughter's life. The resolution of Anna's case represented more than just the closing of a cold case file. It demonstrated the power of preserving evidence and never giving up on victims, regardless of their circumstances in life. The investigators who collected DNA evidence in 1988 could never have imagined that their careful work would eventually lead to justice more than 3 decades later. The case also highlighted how advances in genetic genealogy were revolutionizing cold case investigations, offering hope to thousands of families still waiting for answers about their loved ones. District Attorney Adams used the press conference to remind the community that Anna's case was just one of many that remained unsolved. This is one cold case. There are others out there. We need the help of the public to assist us to obtain leads. Not every case is going to have a great DNA profile, but someone out there has some information, and we're never going to stop looking, as the Pennsylvania State Police displayed in this case. His words served as both a promise to other victims' families and a call for continued public assistance in solving crimes. The case of Anna Jean Kane stands as a testament to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of scientific advancement to bring justice even when it seems impossible. While Scott Grimm never faced trial for his actions that October night in 1988, his identification as Anna's attacker provided something invaluable to her children and community: the truth. Anna's daughter, Tamika, perhaps said it best when she reflected on her mother's legacy. She was a person. She was my mother. We loved her and still do. She never got the opportunity to make a change. We will always wonder why. Why did it have to be this way? The memory of Anna Jean Kane will forever be intertwined with the 34-year journey to uncover the truth about her final moments. Though justice in the traditional sense was denied by Scott Grimm's death, the resolution of her case ensured that Anna would be remembered not just as a victim of violence, but as a mother whose children never stopped fighting for answers. In death, Anna Kane received something that had often eluded her in life: recognition as someone who mattered, someone who deserved justice, and someone whose story would not be forgotten. The tragic end of a lifelong friendship. Susan Berman's story. Susan Jane Berman was born on May 18, 1945, into a world most children never see. Her father, David "Davy" Berman, was a Jewish-American organized crime figure who took control of the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas after gangster Benjamin Bugsy Siegel lost his life in 1947. Her mother, Betty Ewald, was a traveling tap dancer who had taken the stage name Gladys Evans. When Susan was just 2 months old, her family moved from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she would spend her early years surrounded by the glittering lights and hidden shadows of Sin City. Growing up at the Flamingo Hotel, Susan lived what she would later describe as the life of a mob princess. Her childhood was filled with extraordinary experiences that seemed magical to her young eyes. Elvis Presley and Liberace performed at her birthday parties, and a painting of her in braids hung in the hotel lobby. When boredom struck, she would run to the front desk, ask for keys to empty rooms, and order tomato soup and chocolate ice cream from room service. Despite occasional kidnapping drills, she remained largely unaware of the dangerous world her father operated in. To her, he seemed like the most normal father imaginable, reading bedtime stories and challenging her to memorize all 48 states and their capitals. But Susan's sense of security was shattered when she turned 12. Her father passed away during colorectal surgery, leaving her devastated and confused about the circumstances. The tragedy deepened 2 years later when her mother, who had been in and out of mental institutions struggling with depression, lost her life due to an overdose that Susan believed was intentional. At just 14 years old, Susan was orphaned and forced to live with relatives and attend boarding schools, trying to piece together a new life from the fragments of her broken childhood. After moving to Los Angeles to attend UCLA, Susan's world expanded beyond the shadows of her past. It was during the late 1960s, at a campus pool party, that she met Robert Durst, an eccentric heir to a New York real estate fortune. Both young people carried deep emotional scars from their childhoods. Durst's mother had either fallen or jumped from the roof of the family home when he was just 7 years old. This shared experience of early trauma and loss created an immediate bond between them. They became fast friends, calling each other Bobby and Susie, and their friendship would prove to be one of the most enduring relationships in both of their lives. Susan graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from UCLA in 1967, where she and Durst solidified their friendship. She continued her education at UC Berkeley, earning a Master of Arts in Journalism in 1969. As a writer and journalist, she eventually authored several books, including her memoir Easy Street, the true story of a mob family, where she detailed her gradual realization of her father's true role in organized crime. In the acknowledgements page of that book, she thanked only a handful of special supportive friends, including Bobby Durst. The truth about her father's criminal activities had remained hidden from Susan for years. It wasn't until a college friend questioned what her father had actually done in Las Vegas that she began investigating. When she told the friend that her father was a hotel owner, he responded that a book he'd read described her father as someone who could take someone's life with one hand behind his back. This revelation sent Susan racing to a bookstore on Santa Monica Boulevard, where she tore through pages until she found her father's name linked to references to Sing Sing prison. Later, she requested her father's FBI file and asked a federal employee directly if the documents indicated whether her father had taken someone's life. The impersonal response was chilling. Oh, yes, he was a trained killer. The knowledge of her father's true nature affected Susan deeply. She suffered from debilitating migraines and anxiety attacks after learning the truth, and she wrote later that she lived with a dread that apocalyptic events could happen at any moment, and that death and love seem linked forever in my fantasies. Despite everything, her loyalty to her father remained unshakable, a trait that would define many of her relationships throughout her life. In 1984, Susan married Christopher, Mr. Margulies, at the Hotel Bel Air, with Durst walking her down the aisle. The marriage was brief and troubled, ending tragically in 1986 when Margulies lost his life due to substance use. Throughout these difficulties, Durst remained a constant presence in Susan's life, offering support during her darkest moments. By 1982, Susan's loyalty to her old friend was put to the ultimate test. Durst's wife, Kathleen McCormack Durst, disappeared under mysterious circumstances on January 31, 1982. Kathleen had been planning to divorce Durst and was attending medical school to become a doctor. According to witness testimony, Durst had been physically and emotionally hurting his wife. Kathleen's nursing instructor, Gilbert Watlington, testified that Kathleen had made late-night phone calls describing how Durst was causing her serious harm to the point where she needed hospitalization. Kathleen had even told Watlington, "If anything should happen to me, don't let that person get away with it." When reporters began pursuing Durst for comments about his wife's disappearance, he turned to Susan for help. She agreed to act as his spokesperson, handling media inquiries and shielding him from public scrutiny. But according to prosecutors and some of Susan's friends, her assistance went far beyond simple media relations. Film producer Linda testified that Susan explicitly told her she had called New York's Albert Einstein College of Medicine, pretending to be Kathleen as a favor to Durst. This phone call, made the day after Kathleen's disappearance, was designed to make it appear that Kathleen was still alive and simply too ill to attend classes. Friend Miriam Barnes recalled Susan nervously telling her that she'd done a favor for Durst after the disappearance. According to Barnes' testimony, Susan had said, "If anything ever happens to me, Bobby did it." Despite these concerns, Susan's loyalty to Durst never wavered. Film producer Linda testified that Susan compared the things she did for Bobby to the way her mother had shown love to her father by keeping his secrets. If you could be loyal to somebody, Susan had told her, that was love. For nearly 2 decades, life continued relatively normally for both Susan and Durst. Susan pursued her writing career, contributing to publications like the San Francisco Examiner, City Magazine, and CBS's People Show. She worked on screenplays and attempted to finance a Broadway musical based on the Dreyfus Affair, though Durst declined to invest in that particular project. At the time of her passing, she was developing a project for Showtime called Sin City, intended as their answer to HBO's hit series The Sopranos. However, Susan's writing career began to struggle in the late 1990s, and she found herself in increasingly dire financial straits. She was forced to sell her mother's jewelry and repeatedly asked Durst for financial assistance. He responded by sending her 2 checks, each for $25,000, in the months before her passing. Her last letter to Durst, dated November 5, 2000, expressed hope that her constant requests for money wouldn't ruin their friendship. The situation took a dangerous turn in 2000 when New York State Police, at the request of Westchester County District Attorney Gina Pirro, reopened the investigation into Kathleen's disappearance. Friends of the missing woman urged authorities to contact Susan for an interview, recognizing that she might have important information about the case. When Susan learned that investigators wanted to speak with her, she contacted Durst to inform him of the development. On December 22, 2000, Susan had dinner with friends in Santa Monica. During the meal, she complained about her landlord, who wanted to evict her from her Benedict Canyon home. It would be one of her final meals. Just 2 days later, on Christmas Eve 2000, neighbors noticed Susan's dogs running loose in the area. When police arrived at her rented home on North Alta Loma Road, they found the back door slightly open. Inside the house, officers made a heartbreaking discovery. Susan was found in the doorway of one of the bedrooms, having lost her life due to a single gunshot. She was barefoot, and her purse remained on the counter with nothing taken from it. The scene suggested she had known her attacker and felt comfortable enough to let them into her home. There were no signs of a struggle, indicating she had trusted the person who took her life. The investigation initially focused on various potential suspects, including her landlord, business manager, and possible connections to organized crime syndicates. Headlines speculated whether the case was a mob hit, given Susan's family background. However, the case quickly went cold, with few leads and minimal physical evidence to guide investigators. The breakthrough in Susan's case came from an unexpected source, Hollywood. In 2010, director Andrew Jaecki released a fictionalized film called All Good Things, loosely based on Durst's life and starring Ryan Gosling. After watching the movie, Durst contacted Jaecki with praise and a single criticism. He didn't like the depiction involving harm to a dog. This contact led to Durst agreeing to participate in a 6-part HBO documentary series called The Jinx, the life and deaths of Robert Durst. During the filming process, Durst sat for extensive recorded interviews despite his lawyer's advice against participating. The documentary makers also uncovered crucial evidence that would prove pivotal to the case. They discovered that police had received a mysterious note postmarked the day before Susan's body was found. The envelope was addressed to Beverly Hills Police, with Beverly Hills misspelled, and contained an anonymous note with Susan's address and the word cadaver. This note had led police directly to Susan's remains. The documentary team made a startling connection when they found a letter Durst had written to Susan in 1999. The handwriting and the same distinctive misspelling of Beverly as Beverly appeared in both documents. When confronted with this evidence during filming, Durst went to a restroom, apparently unaware that his microphone was still recording. What he said next shocked viewers around the world. "What the hell did I do?" Killed them all, of course. On March 14, 2015, just 1 day before the final episode of The Jinx was set to air, Durst was arrested at a New Orleans hotel in connection with Susan's case. When authorities searched his hotel room, they found firearms, a fake ID, and a mask. The arrest was described as urgent due to the damaging evidence revealed in the documentary's finale. Following his arrest, Durst participated in a recorded interview with Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney John Lewin. During this conversation, when Lewin described Susan as someone Durst cared about, the millionaire responded, "Best friend." When asked directly if he had harmed Susan, Durst said no. But when Lewin pressed him about whether he would lie if he had committed such an act, Durst admitted, correct. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and complex. Opening statements in Durst's trial began in March 2020, but the case was suspended after just 2 days due to the COVID-19 pandemic. When the trial resumed more than a year later, both sides were allowed to deliver new opening statements. Prosecutors argued that Susan knew her attacker and voluntarily let them into her home because she trusted them. During the 5-month trial, prosecutors presented evidence not only about Susan's case, but also about Kathleen's disappearance and the 2001 death of Durst's neighbor Morris Black in Texas. They argued that Durst had eliminated Susan to prevent her from cooperating with the reopened investigation into his wife's disappearance. The prosecution called more than 100 witnesses, including Susan's friends, who testified about her loyalty to Durst and the assistance she had provided him over the years. In a stunning development, Durst himself took the witness stand for 15 days. After years of denying he was anywhere near Susan when she lost her life, he admitted that he had found her body, a revelation his attorneys called strategic. Durst testified that he had flown to California intending to spend time with Susan and had let himself into her home with a spare key. He claimed he found her on the bedroom floor and, unable to reach police from her landline, drove to a pay phone on Sunset Boulevard. Instead of calling directly, he said he decided to mail the anonymous cadaver note to police because he didn't want them to recognize his voice. The testimony proved damaging to Durst's case. During cross-examination, lead prosecutor John Lewin forced him to admit to multiple lies and engaged him in heated exchanges that lasted for weeks. The climax came when Lewin asked, "Did you end Susan Berman's life?" Durst replied, "No." Lewin then asked, "But if you did, you would lie about it, correct?" To which Durst answered, "Correct." After just 8 hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict on September 17, 2021. They found Durst guilty of first-degree murder in Susan's case. The jurors also upheld special circumstance allegations that Durst had laid in wait and eliminated Susan because she was a witness. Under California law, these findings meant Durst would face life in prison without the possibility of parole. Notably, Durst was not present in the courtroom when the verdict was read, as he was in quarantine due to a potential COVID-19 exposure. Outside the courthouse, prosecutor John Lewin revealed that jurors had told him they believed the prosecution had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Durst was responsible not only for Susan's demise, but also for his wife's disappearance and Morris Black's death. On October 14, 2021, Durst was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Susan's family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. Her stepson, Sayeb Kaufman, spoke about the devastating impact of losing Susan, saying he had not had one day off from the absolute destruction, grief or pain that this has caused me. He pleaded with Durst to reveal the location of Kathleen McCormack's remains, telling him that any hope of any kind of redemption you can find is in letting them know where to find Kathy. Susan's cousin, Denny Marcus, acknowledged the complex relationship between Susan and her killer, saying, "Hate was never in my wheelhouse or hers, and for that reason I will never hate Bobby, because she loved him." Another cousin, Davy Berman, broke down in tears as he told Susan she could finally rest because justice had been done. Throughout the sentencing hearing, Durst sat in silence, never acknowledging the pleas from Susan's family or offering any information about Kathleen's fate. His attorneys announced they would appeal the conviction, maintaining his innocence. However, Durst would never see the outcome of that appeal. On January 10, 2022, just 4 months after his conviction, he passed away in prison custody. The prosecution's lead attorney, John Lewin, offered insight into Susan's tragic role in the events that led to her demise. He argued that Susan had not willingly helped cover up what she believed was an intentional act. Instead, he suggested that Durst had likely told her that Kathleen's disappearance was some kind of accident, and Susan, loving Bob and wanting to believe and trust him, decided to help. Lewin concluded, in the end, she made the mistake that many other people did in Robert Durst's life. She believed in him. Susan's story is ultimately one of loyalty taken to a tragic extreme. Raised in a world where loyalty was valued above all else, she carried this principle throughout her life, even when it put her in grave danger. Her friendship with Durst, forged in shared trauma and sustained by deep affection, ultimately cost her everything. She was a talented writer whose life was tragically cut short at age 55, leaving behind family and friends whose lives were forever changed by her loss. The case serves as a heartbreaking reminder of how misplaced trust and unwavering loyalty can lead to devastating consequences. Susan Berman, the mafia princess, who survived a childhood marked by loss and hardship, could not survive the betrayal of someone she considered her dearest friend. Her memory lives on through the love of those who knew her and the justice that was finally served more than 2 decades after her life was taken from her. The Gabby Petito case, a journey that ended in tragedy. Gabrielle Venora Petito was born on March 19, 1999, in Blue Point, New York, into a loving family. She had 6 younger siblings and half-siblings who looked up to her bright spirit and creative nature. Her parents, Joseph Petito and Nichelle Schmidt, had separated during her childhood, creating the kind of blended family dynamic that would later define her support system. Joseph had remarried Tara Petito, while Nichelle was with Jim Schmidt, but despite the complexity of their family structure, they all remained devoted to Gabby's happiness and dreams. Gabby was the kind of young woman who brought light wherever she went. In high school at Bayport Blue Point High School, she formed a large circle of friends and developed a passion for photography and creativity. It was during these formative years that she met a quiet, soft-spoken boy named Brian Christopher Laundrie. Her mother Nichelle would later recall thinking Brian was interesting and kind, watching him sit patiently and do art projects with Gabby's younger sisters. He got along with TJ, her brother, and he just seemed like a nice person, she remembered. After graduating in 2017, Gabby tried different paths, spending time in North Carolina working as a hostess and in restaurant kitchens. She applied to Cape Fear Community College, but never attended, instead choosing to return home and eventually begin dating Brian in March 2019. When their relationship became serious, they made the decision to move to Florida together, where Brian's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, welcomed Gabby into their North Port home. Both young people found work at a local public store, Gabby as a pharmacy technician and Brian in the grocery department. The couple's relationship seemed to flourish during their early years together. In late 2019 and early 2020, they embarked on their first cross-country adventure, driving from New York to California and visiting iconic places like Las Vegas and Yosemite National Park. These experiences sparked something in Gabby, a wanderlust and desire to document the beauty she saw around her. In March 2020, she celebrated her 21st birthday in Florida, and by July of that year, Brian had proposed during a camping trip. However, Gabby's parents later revealed that they learned about the engagement in an unexpected way. "I'm an old-school person, and as an old-school person, the one thing you do is you go up to the father of the person you want to marry and you ask him for their hand in marriage," her father Joe would later say. "That didn't happen. We found out on Facebook. All of us did. As the COVID-19 pandemic changed everyone's plans, wedding preparations were put on hold. Instead, Gabby and Brian focused on planning their next adventure. In December 2020, Gabby purchased a 2012 Ford Transit Connect van and had it converted into a camper. To fund their dream trip, she began working grueling 50-hour weeks at Taco Bell while also working as a nutritionist, while Brian took a job at an organic juice bar. Gabby was determined to turn their journey into something more than just a vacation. She started building a social media presence, describing her interests as art, yoga, and veggies, on Instagram, and beginning to document her life in ways that would inspire others. On June 17, 2021, the couple returned to Blue Point for a family celebration, her brother TJ's high school graduation. It was a happy occasion, filled with the kind of family warmth that had always surrounded Gabby. Nobody knew it would be the last time many of them would see her alive. On July 2, 2021, Gabby and Brian set off from Blue Point in their converted van, ready to spend 4 months exploring America's most beautiful national parks. The early weeks of their journey seemed magical. They visited Monument Rocks in Kansas, hiked through Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado, and marveled at the red rock formations of Zion and Bryce Canyon in Utah. Gabby documented everything, posting photos and videos that captured not just the stunning landscapes, but her genuine joy and excitement. Her posts showed a young woman living her dream, sharing her adventure with followers who were inspired by her courage to pursue something different. But beneath the surface of their picture-perfect social media presence, cracks were beginning to show. On August 12, 2021, those cracks became visible to the outside world when a witness in Moab, Utah, called 911 to report what appeared to be a domestic dispute. The caller, identified as Chris, described seeing a man and woman who appeared to have some sort of dispute outside the Moonflower Community Cooperative. At one point, she was punching him in the arm and or face and trying to get into the van, he wrote in his statement. Most disturbing was what he overheard Gabby say to Brian. "Why do you have to be so mean?" When Moab City police officers pulled over their van near Arches National Park, they found Gabby in the passenger seat, sobbing uncontrollably. The body camera footage would later be viewed by millions, showing a young woman in clear distress trying to explain what had happened. "Yeah, I don't know if some days I have really bad OCD," she told officers through tears. "I was apologizing to him and saying, 'I'm sorry that I'm so mean,' because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I can get really frustrated." Gabby tried to downplay the physical nature of their fight, but when officers pointed out marks on her arm and face, she became more honest. She revealed that Brian had been telling her to shut up and had grabbed her face, leaving a visible mark. Brian's version of events was different, claiming he was trying to create distance and that Gabby had hit him with her phone. One of the responding officers wrote in his report, "At no point in my investigation did Gabrielle stop crying, breathing heavily, or compose a sentence without needing to wipe away tears, wipe her nose, or rub her knees with her hands." Despite the concerning nature of what they witnessed, the officers ultimately determined that Gabby had been the aggressor in the specific incident they investigated. Neither wanted to press charges, and rather than making an arrest, they decided to separate the couple for the night. Brian was taken to a local motel, while Gabby was allowed to stay in the van. The next morning, they resumed their journey together. An independent investigation would later find that the officers made several unintentional mistakes during this stop. Captain Brandon Ratcliffe, who prepared the report, noted that while Gabby may have been the aggressor in that specific incident, it's very likely Gabby was a long-term victim of domestic violence, whether that be physically, mentally, and/or emotionally. One officer even admitted to investigators, "I would have done anything to stop it if I would have known that was coming. I am devastated about it." After the Moab incident, the couple's journey continued, but warning signs were mounting. On August 17, in an unusual move, Brian flew alone from Salt Lake City back to Florida, leaving Gabby behind. According to the Laundrie family attorney, he made this trip to obtain some items and empty and close a storage unit to save money as they contemplated extending the road trip. Gabby spent several lonely days at a Fairfield Inn and Suites hotel near the airport, waiting for his return. Brian came back on August 23, and they resumed their travels. On August 25, Gabby's mother received what she thought was a normal conversation with her daughter. Gabby mentioned they were heading from Utah toward Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. That same day, Gabby posted what would be her final Instagram post, photos of herself in front of a colorful butterfly mural outside a restaurant in Ogden, Utah. The images showed her radiant smile, with no hint of the tragedy that was about to unfold. 2 days later, on August 27, witnesses would report seeing the couple at the Merry Piglet's Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A witness described Brian as aggressive and said he had an argument with restaurant staff, apparently about money. The witness later saw Gabby return to the restaurant alone, crying and apologizing for Laundrie's behavior. That afternoon, CCTV cameras captured them at a Whole Foods store in Jackson, Wyoming. The timestamp showed them entering at 2:14 p.m. and leaving at 2:30 p.m. Then sitting in their van for about 20 minutes before driving away toward Bridgeteton National Forest at 2:56 p.m. This footage would be the last known recording of Gabby alive. That evening, Gabby's mother received a text that immediately raised concerns. "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Gabby had never referred to her grandfather by his first name. "I questioned it, but then I thought there were fires out that way," Nichelle Schmidt would later recall. "Maybe they had to reroute. Maybe Brian did send the text. Maybe she's driving the van." Over the next few days, several witnesses reported encounters that would later prove crucial to understanding what happened. A woman on TikTok described picking up Brian hitchhiking alone near Coulter Bay Village on August 29. She said he freaked out when he learned they were going to Jackson Hole instead of Jackson, Wyoming, and demanded to be let out at Jackson Lake Dam after offering $200 for the ride. Another witness picked him up from that same location about 10 minutes later, driving him back toward the Spread Creek area where their van was parked. Brian appeared antsy about getting out before reaching the campsite itself. According to Brian's parents, he called his mother on August 29, and something in his tone had completely changed by the end of the conversation. When his father called back, Brian told him that Gabby's gone and that he might need a lawyer. He refused to provide any further details. On August 30, a final text was sent from Gabby's phone: "No service in Yosemite." Her mother knew immediately that Gabby had not sent this message. Additional suspicious activity included text messages exchanged between Brian and Gabby's phones, and a $700 transaction from Gabby's account to Brian with the message, "Goodbye." Investigators believe Brian conducted all this activity in an attempt to create an alibi. On September 1, Brian returned alone to his parents' home in North Port, Florida, driving Gabby's van. For the next 10 days, while Gabby's family grew increasingly frantic trying to reach her, the Laundrie family remained silent. They even went camping together at Fort DeSoto Park on September 6 and 7. Gabby's mother, growing desperate, began calling and texting Brian and his parents, begging for any information about her daughter's whereabouts. She received no response. On September 11, after not hearing from Gabby for over 2 weeks, Nichelle Schmidt filed a missing person report with Suffolk County Police. The story quickly gained national attention, particularly when it became clear that Brian had returned home without his fiancée and was refusing to cooperate with investigators. His parents hired attorney Stephen Bertolino, and based on his advice, they remained completely silent about Gabby's disappearance. The silence from the Laundrie family only intensified public interest and concern. On September 15, Brian was officially named a person of interest in Gabby's disappearance, but the family's ordeal was far from over. On September 13, Brian left his family's home, and on September 17, his parents reported him missing as well. Police later realized they had mistakenly thought Brian's mother was Brian himself when they saw someone enter the house on September 15. Meanwhile, the search for Gabby continued across the country. Her parents appeared on national television, pleading for information and holding up photos of their smiling daughter. She always had that creative eye, her stepmother Tara remembered. She would take videos of us doing things. So I think that's something that she always really enjoyed to do. So why not try to make it as a career? On September 19, 2021, the call that every parent dreads finally came. Human remains consistent with Gabby's description had been found in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area of Bridgeteton National Forest in Wyoming. Jim Schmidt, Gabby's stepfather, would later describe that devastating moment. "They said we found remains consistent of your daughter. I remember I was crying, and I said you have to be sure, like I have to be sure if I'm making this phone call. They showed me pictures, and I confirmed it was our daughter." An autopsy confirmed everyone's worst fears. Dr. Brent Blue, the Teton County coroner, determined that 22-year-old Gabby had lost her life due to head and neck trauma, along with strangulation. The manner of her passing was ruled a homicide, and she had lost her life approximately 3 to 4 weeks before her remains were discovered. The young woman who had dreamed of inspiring others through her travels was gone. On September 23, federal authorities issued an arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie, but not for Gabby's demise. Instead, they charged him with unauthorized use of her debit card, as he had withdrawn more than $1,000 between August 30 and September 1. A massive manhunt ensued, with law enforcement agencies searching the vast Carlton Reserve in Florida, where Brian's parents claimed he had gone hiking. For over a month, the search continued while the nation watched and waited. On October 5, Brian's sister, Cassie Laundrie, made a public plea on ABC News, encouraging her brother to surrender to authorities. 2 days later, Brian's father joined investigators in searching areas of the reserve where Brian used to frequent. On October 20, 2021, the search came to a tragic end. Brian's skeletal remains were discovered in Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, in an area that had recently been underwater due to flooding. The remains were identified through forensic analysis, and among his belongings, investigators found a notebook that would provide the final, heartbreaking piece of the puzzle. On November 23, authorities announced that Brian had lost his life due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But perhaps most significantly, on January 21, 2022, the FBI revealed that Brian's notebook contained a written confession in which he admitted to taking Gabby's life. The investigation was officially closed, with authorities stating that no other individuals were directly involved in Gabby's tragic end. In June 2022, the Laundrie family's attorney released the full contents of Brian's notebook confession. In it, Brian claimed he had acted after Gabby suffered what he described as a fall into water that left her injured and in unbearable pain. "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but now I see all the mistake I made," he wrote. The note concluded with his plans for ending his own life. "I am ending my life, not because of a fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her." However, experts immediately questioned Brian's account, noting that it did not match the physical evidence discovered during the investigation. Michael Alcazar from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice described Brian as someone who doesn't want to own up to what he did, and suggested he was trying to find justification for the actions he did. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Gabby's parents discovered troubling text messages on her phone that revealed the true nature of her relationship with Brian. One message showed Gabby writing, "Don't try to control me because it only makes me mad. I love you so much, but it's the way you speak to me that hurts me the most." They also found a handwritten letter from Gabby to Brian that read, "Brian, you know how much I love you. Just please stop crying and stop calling me names. You in pain is killing me." These discoveries painted a picture of a young woman trapped in a relationship marked by emotional distress and control, desperately trying to maintain love while enduring treatment that caused her deep pain. The legal battles that followed were complex and emotionally draining for both families. In November 2022, a Florida judge ruled in favor of Gabby's family in a wrongful death lawsuit against Brian's estate, awarding them $3 million. In a separate action, Gabby's parents sued the Laundrie parents and their attorney, claiming they had suffered emotional distress because the Laundries knew Gabby was gone, but issued public statements suggesting hope she would be found. This lawsuit was resolved through mediation on February 21, 2024, with confidential terms. as Gabby's parents stated. All parties reluctantly agreed in order to avoid further legal expenses and prolonged personal conflict. Our hope is to close this chapter of our lives, to allow us to move on and continue to honor the legacy of our beautiful daughter, Gabby. The family also filed a $50 million wrongful death lawsuit against the Moab Police Department, arguing that officers had failed to properly respond to the domestic violence incident in August. However, on November 20, 2024, a Utah judge dismissed the lawsuit, citing sovereign immunity protections. The family has appealed this decision to the Utah Supreme Court. Throughout their legal battles and public advocacy, Gabby's parents have channeled their grief into meaningful action. They established the Gabby Petito Foundation to combat domestic violence and assist in locating missing persons. She made a difference, her father Joe said. People saw a beautiful soul, and she had an impact that changed the lives of a lot of people in the world. There's no more amazing legacy that you could have. The case continues to serve as a tragic reminder of how domestic violence can escalate and how important it is for communities, law enforcement, and support systems to recognize warning signs before it's too late. Gabby's story has sparked important conversations about missing white woman syndrome and has prompted her family to advocate for equal attention to missing persons cases involving marginalized communities. As her parents continue their mission to honor Gabby's memory and protect other families from experiencing similar heartbreak, they carry with them the memory of a vibrant young woman who had dreams of inspiring others through her creativity and adventures. Her legacy now serves as both a call for justice and a reminder that behind every tragedy is a human being who was deeply loved and whose life had immeasurable value. In their continued fight for awareness and change, Gabby's family ensures that her voice still carries forward, potentially helping to save the lives of others who might find themselves in similar situations of distress and hidden suffering.